Forza Horizon 6 is finally here, and this is it running on the Xbox Ally X. This is the early access version of the game, which you will get with the premium edition, so there is some things that could change or improve over time. In this video, I'm going to be going over the performance, the settings I'm using, and what I recommend you do in order to get the most out of your handheld. If you just want to go straight to benchmarks with no commentary, I do have a separate video for that, linked in the description down below, but for this one, we're going to be focusing on real gameplay and overall experience. If you enjoy handheld performance tests like this and you would like to see more, definitely go ahead and subscribe to the channel, like this video, and let's get straight to it. So I'm going to do as I do with all my videos. I'm going to start with the settings first. You can definitely go ahead and skip this if you want to, but we're going to go into the settings and then down to video. From here, I have it set to 1920 by 1080. With the frame rate unlocked just to see how high it actually would go, but I do recommend going ahead and locking this at 60 for a more consistent experience. Now I have here VSync turned off for the testing purposes of this video. However, if you are going to be playing this at 35 watt turbo, I do recommend turning it on because there is noticeable screen tearing at the higher frame rates. Other than that, I have full screen on. Motion blur is off. It's my personal preference. If you want, you could go ahead and leave that on. Scrolling down, I have AMD FSR set to balance with the sharpness at 0.5, and then everything else is left as is. Next, we're going to go over to the graphic settings, and from here I have a custom mix, mostly high across the board, with a few adjustments here and there. Screen space reflections at medium, particle effects at medium. Audio quality is going to be set to ultra, and even though it does add some CPU load, it doesn't really add any real performance impact, especially since the CPU is only at about 40% usage, so there's definitely a lot of headroom there to bump this up. For the testing of this game, I did use a mix of myself driving the car as well as the auto drive feature, which just allows me to better observe the performance without actually having to focus on driving. At 17 watts in the open areas, I'm looking at around 45 to 50 FPS, which is honestly a lot better than what I was expecting, especially with the settings set to high. Once you move into denser city areas, however, this is where it tends to drop a bit, usually hovering around 40 to 45 FPS on the high, with occasional dips into the 30s depending on what's loading in. Now, it does still feel very playable, but you can definitely see the difference compared to the open environments. There are occasional frame drops here and there, but it's expected with a map this large. It feels like shaders are just compiling in the background or assets are loaded in. It happens to dip for a second and then comes right back up, but it's something really that takes away from the experience. Now at 35 watt turbo mode, which is going to be the max wattage you're allowed while plugged in, the same city run improves quite a bit. Instead of mid 40s, you're now looking at about mid 50s FPS on average, sometimes hitting 60. With dips closer to about 60 during heavier movements, and in open areas it can even push up to the 70s, but then again, I recommend still capping the frame rate at 60 just to keep things a little bit more consistent. Another thing is how the game handles cutscenes. There are two types here. There's the pre-rendered cutscene, which are locked at a 30 FPS count, and then you have the in-game render cutscenes where you will see your car or your character, and those can fluctuate anywhere between 40 to 70 FPS depending on what's happening on screen. When it focuses more on a single character or your character in general, it tends to be a little higher, but then there's cinematic versions of the cutscene where there's cars and effects, and that can actually drop a little bit lower to about the 40 FPS range, especially when you're in the city. Going from 30 FPS pre-rendered cutscenes into gameplay that's around 60 and above can feel a little bit jarring, and it's very noticeable in the beginning of the game. I did look through the settings and I didn't see anything in there to uncap that or change that in any way. I'm not sure if that's an option that would be added later on or if that's just how it is. That could change later, but as of now, that just is how it is. Other than that, everything else feels dialed in. Controls are tight, responsiveness is exactly what you would want it to be, and each car feels different in its own way that makes sense. Audio is clean, no drops or issues there, and overall it just feels like a really polished experience on the handheld. At the end of the day, Forza Horizon 6 runs extremely well on the Xbox Ally X. Not sponsored, no ad. Whenever you're playing at 17 watts for the battery life or just pushing 35 watts for a smoother experience, it holds up in both scenarios. This is easily one I would recommend you play on the handheld. I'm going to have some extra gameplay at the end of the video with no commentary, so if you want to go ahead and stay tuned for that and see more of how the game runs, you can. But that's going to be it for this one. This was Forza Horizon 6 running on the Xbox Ally X. If you happen to have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comment section down below. If you haven't already, consider subscribing, and I hope to see you on the next one. Peace.
One rising star hoping to secure that purple wristband is して盛り上げてきたけど、今日がいよいよ本番。ホライズン放送衛星の打ち上げだよ。サングラスをかけて一緒に打ち上げパーティーに参加してね。
ROG